Now, Europe's dismal finances were very much in focus at the recent G20 summit in Cannes, as leaders of the world's 20 biggest economies got together to map out a way forward. Well, they agreed to prop up the International Monetary Fund, and now its chief is bringing the crisis talks to Russia by meeting President Medvedev in Moscow. RT's Katerina Grachova is keeping an eye on this for us.
Russia seems to be determined and willing to help the Eurozone through IMF. But Dmitry Medvedev today reiterated he wants this help to be targeted, to be comprehensible, to be direct, and to be done through the international financial institutions such as IMF. Well, Russia paid the last portion of its debt to the organization back in 2005, and since then it has been contributing to the IMF by providing money for countries which experience serious financial, economic difficulties or even default, as it is now the case with Greece. The current euro crisis and recent developments in Greece completely took over the G20 summit in Cannes last week, where the leaders agreed to bolster the role of the IMF and other financial institutions to save the euro and eurozone. And one of the hopes for the euro is help coming from the emerging economies, from the BRICS, including Russia. And although the current euro crisis doesn't directly affect the BRICS countries, they did promise to come up with financial support for Europe. As far as Russia is concerned, here we are talking about a potential compensation which could exceed $10 billion. However, President Medvedev made it clear from the very beginning that there is a condition on Russia and other partners within the BRICS to provide this money to Europe, and that is that their voice needs to be heard within the IMF and other financial institutions. After all, Russia itself keeps almost 45% of its international reserves in euros. Well, Russia is likely to ask for a high price tag of for its offer of support. In particular, its chances of entering the World Trade Organization by the end of this year, finally, after years and years of bidding, look more than promising. Above all, Russia is likely to continue lobbying for the reform of the IMF. Well, the IMF was formed in 1945, and currently IMF commitments amount to almost $300 billion of funds, and the major borrowers at this point are Greece, Portugal and Ireland.
Well, for more analysis, we can now talk to our business editor, Nick Poole. So, Nick, what's your take on this? What's Lagarde looking for here in Russia?
Well, clearly she's looking for money. The parlous state of Europe means that they need more for their bailout funds, and they need to come to where the money is, and to a certain extent that's Russia.
Yeah, so do you think she's actually going to get that money that she wants from Russia?
Well, there will be conditions attached, and the primary condition will be that Europe needs to sort its own house out. It needs to implement the structural reforms necessary so that money spent on a bailout is not just wasted money.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Russia did go through tough economic times, but right now it's in a position to help. How did it manage a previous crisis and the financial crisis itself? How did it get through and is now in this position?
Well, it managed the 2008 financial crisis by being prudent. It also had quite a large reserve fund, although it should be noted that Russia's economy contracted sharply during that downturn by about 8%. It's the fact that it's come out of it quite well that's perhaps why Lagarde is here now. Also, Russia's reserve fund was sufficiently strong that it was able to prop up its ruble, and is now in a position where it could actually help out Europe.
All right, and of course we know that Lagarde's next step in this trip is China. Do you think that the cash is really just coming from the East now, that this is really the place where Western countries should look?
I think that's probably an overstatement. I mean, clearly some of the countries in Northern Europe are still quite healthy. Canada, Australia, there is money still in the world. China and Russia also are quickly emerging economies with healthy budgets. The question is really, do they want to spend this money on Europe? Now, Europe is regarded as relatively wealthy, indeed it is. And so, would the money be better spent on Russian people or on Greek people in this particular instance?
Okay, well, let's look at where all this money is going to end up in. They're propping up the International Monetary Fund. Do you think at the end of the day that struggling economies that the IMF is supposed to be helping, which will actually benefit from this?
Well, not without the structural reforms. I mean, if you just throw good money after bad, it's lost money. There is no quick fix. And ultimately, the political situation in Europe is still sufficiently complex, difficult, particularly in Greece and in Italy, that every time they try to impose new austerity measures, structural reforms, those are resisted heavily by the populations, which is understandable because it leads to sort of long-term hardship. But without that, then how do those economies ever become competitive again? It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, so it's not just about the cash, it's structural reforms you're talking about there. Thanks very much for your insight. Our business editor, Nick Poole. Thank you.